and this is Vote Her In, a collaboration between Two Broads Talking Politics and Rebecca Sive. So we're here in December. Happily now know for sure that Biden and Harris have won, and we are very excited about that. And I'm going to turn this over now to Rebecca to introduce our guest today. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Kelly. It's good to see you. And yes, we're well into December, but we're also well into something wonderful here that we're going to explore this evening. This is our third episode in a series about women artists, women who are committed to civic activism and improving the community and even political work and statements in their own art. And so we're joined by two fabulous women, printmakers from Chicago, who really have reputations all around the country, but we're glad that they live in Chicago. Deb Maris-Later, who I think I've known over 20 years. She was founded the Chicago Printmaking Collaborative, and I've been stopping by periodically all this time and learning lots from her and getting to share in what she's doing and why she's doing it. And then our second wonderful guest is Raeleen Kao, who I met about 5 years ago, and she had this extraordinary show that really was her prints and all about women's bodies and women's hair, and it was intensely political to me. And I've watched her work since then and just been really enthralled. I kind of make it my business to tell people about her whenever I can. So what we're going to do this evening is Deb and Raeleen are each going to make a presentation about their work, why they do it, why it has political content, the significance of it in the times we're living in. And then Kelly and I will, share a few questions with Deb and Raeleen afterwards. And you all should know that there's lots and lots of good links on the website at Two Broads. So if you have a chance later, I encourage you to look at that as well. So with that, I'm going to ask Deb to sort of jump in and take over the screen. Welcome, Deb.
Hi, guys. And I'm also a big fan of Raeleen, and I like to tell everyone about her work as much as possible. So I think we're all on the same page there. I'm going to share the screen. I think I can do it. I just, here we go. I think that'll work. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, good. Okay. And it looks right. It's just the main image. Thank you for putting up with my, I'm new at this. Okay. So I think that was our first slide. There we go. Anyway, so thanks for having us on, and I'm super excited to be part of the talk tonight. You asked me in some early questions to prepare for this talk. You asked how we came to our artistic practice that includes political and community engagement. And I answer that by saying it wasn't actually a conscious decision. And I think the main thing is when being honest as an artist and you're empathetic to the experiences of those who live in the world with us, it's natural to make work that either directly or indirectly addresses inequality, inhumanity, and pillaging of natural resources and all the other things that we care about and worry about. When I was an undergraduate in the early 80s, I was this kind of throwback hippie girl who everyone sought out to make the banners for the activist flavor of the day. And sometimes I actually understood what was happening, and other times I didn't. But the point was that, and I was making building facade-sized banners for just about everything. I just grabbed paint and bed sheets and went to town. And I think I realized that this practice of social engagement was meaningful in some ways. People always need visual collateral for protest and activism and getting the word out. So that's where that came from. And here are a few of my recent images. So printmaking, Raeleen and I are both printmakers, and printmaking has always been tagged as the democratic medium. And historically, the printed multiple has been a vehicle for the broadcast of visual information. And it's a medium traditionally used to level the playing field in the realms of politics, religion, culture, and art. And the medium and its images have served all manner of society as the primary communicator of its day. And I would argue that these same techniques used through the centuries continue to engage people. And I've used my own printmaking studio at Chicago Printmakers Collaborative as a base for making activist art when appropriate. And we often invite the public in for free events where they can print their own protest materials with our guidance. And I thought, just for the sake of showing people what printmaking, a little taste of what printmaking is all about, I'm just going to sort of play this while I talk about what it is. So this is the creating a woodcut of the image that you saw in the earlier slide. It doesn't take a minute to make a woodcut like I'm showing you here. It takes many hours usually, but I just sort of sped up the process. There's something very meditative and beautiful about the carving of a block that we printmakers are just in love with. But the beauty is then you end up with this block that can be printed over and over again, so that you have multiples of it. So not unlike in the past where you had the dissemination of information via printing. It's a similar idea. And the idea that you make this by hand is sort of carving is also a great way to get your anger out. And so lately it's been super helpful because I think a lot of us have been angry about a lot of things. And so that's just pulling the print. And that's just one form of printmaking, but I just wanted to show you that. So any questions so far? I'll keep going if you want. I made these images during that time when we were all freaking out about the 2016 election and all the new policies being implemented by our, well, I won't call names now, but you know what I mean. But anyway, when Trump was elected, we had some issues. And so as artists, we were trying to figure out, well, what can we do? And so printmakers all over the country actually got together and collaborated on a initiative, and this was called Print Organized Protest. Mm-hmm. And it's a national organization out of California with a really cool woman, Janina Lorenas, at the head of it. And it's an organization committed to social justice. And we, with printmaking studios and just independent printmakers all over the country, had a series of open houses so that folks had access to great protest signage and apparel, and they could also print their own. And the cool thing about this is all of these images are open to anyone for download. You can go to their website and download these images of mine. Everything was open source. And again, really, I think printmakers are unique in the sense that they know how to gather and organize. And the piece on the right was one where you could actually fill in whatever it was, meet my storekeeper, meet my local whatever, meet my cousin, meet my whatever. And then you could put whatever picture in there saying like, pretty much we're all immigrants, And there's this this moment when terrible things happen and you think, I'm just an artist. What can I do? I don't have any money. I'm traumatized. My skill set isn't useful. But then you realize that there is this thing that people need and that you can provide it. And that thing is visuals. And the other thing they need is a place to gather and be a community. And that I realized I could do these things in service of the causes I believed in. The other thing is I have this storefront, which is like this free billboard to me that I could fill with whatever I want. And you could see here the scroll of the Say Their Name scroll was made by my son in his calligraphy. And then the Black Lives Matter stuff is in there, and prints by African-American artists that you can, buy when we would donate all the proceeds to different organizations. The She Persisted poster on the right is one that I designed as well. And I should mention that if you go to my website, you won't see any of this there. And I think the reason is because I think this should all be free to anyone who wants it, and it doesn't need to have my name on it. So I would say that, it doesn't have to be all about me, being the artist making these things. I think it's more important that they're just out in the world for people to use. So there you go. Sometimes I feel like, the best way to engage people to be their best selves is just to inspire them. And I think that's, what my work that you'll see on my website, that kind of stuff is about. I'll make beautiful drawings that attract people to look further. And then when they do, I get to kind of twist things around a bit, like a good story, and they'll see things in the image that might make them question preconceived notions of how they see the world. But other times I just want to beat them over the head. I want to wake them up. And so that's where some of these protest posters come from. And sometimes they're just very straightforward. So there's that. So these were, again, some other posters we made. And then we just put them on our storefront window for free. Like people just take them. There's a, little painter's tape on there, and you just take one as needed if you're going to a protest. And so, they usually took about 2 hours to disappear, which was really neat. And with the Black Lives Matter movement, it was just I did these pretty quickly, and the Silence is Violence poster was made also by my son. And it was at a time where we weren't letting anyone in the workshop because of COVID. So it was just the two of us, cranking these things out. Okay, and then let's see where I'm at. Oh, this is just sort of another aspect of my practice, in the sense of running a printmaking studio that is meant to be, community focused. But also, again, in 2017, I was pretty dismayed by the global trend toward nationalism and exclusion, which was reflected in Trump's racist, and xenophobic U.S. immigration policy. And so I launched our 2017 gallery season with a global theme, and particularly showing the work of banned artists. I say that in quotes. And so we did this exhibition celebrating the Persian New Year, and we had this exchange portfolio or, show with people in 5 cities in Iran. And then we showed these Iranian artists, and they're really, really wonderful pieces. And we had to smuggle everything in and out, including the money I had to pay. The money that I paid the artist had to be smuggled out and then paid in some crazy way. But anyway, it was really annoying. But, again, part of all this nonsense. So currently, many of us in the printmaking community have recognized the lack of accessibility of printmaking to artists of color. And we've looked to remedy that with new programming and outreach. So CPCs are partnering with both an organization called Embark, as well as My Block, My Hood, My City. Totally encourage everybody to donate and support those organizations. So we're partnering with them in the spring to bring young people into the workshop. They're mostly South Side organizations that have programs aimed at providing teens with experiences all over the city. And right now we're really excited. And Raeleen, I really have to thank you for this. We are collaborating with this wonderful artist, Kieran Hobson, and she was introduced to me by the lovely Raeleen to make a lithograph on stone. And you can see we grained a big honkin' stone for her to start drawing on. And then we're going to print this and sell it to benefit the Southside Community Arts Center. And that effort was, that fundraiser was spearheaded by our colleagues at the Chicago Printers Guild. And this is really something Raeleen's worked a ton on, and I'm going to let her talk about it when it's her turn. In April, we're also launching a new residency program specifically for women or trans artists of color. And we already have our first artist, which is Octavia Thorns. We're super excited to start working with her. She's coming in from Michigan in April, and we're going to teach her how to screen print, and then we're going to make editions of her work. And our assistant director, Victoria Barquin, is going to work with her on that. We're very excited. So mostly, to wrap up, I realized, a long time ago that my art practice was not separate from my role as a builder of community, but that my art practice included it. I wanted CPC to be a place where we could collectively address social ills, inequality, otherness, and create a safe space for all flavors of humans. And so kind of like this little quote. And then I will just end with a piece, very recent lithograph of mine, so you can see sort of the other kind of work that I do. And that's it.
Wonderful, Deb. Well, we'll talk more about it after we hear from Raeleen.
Okay, there we go.
All right. You guys have talked me up so much. I'm going to do my best.
Take it when you can get it. It's my advice from an older person to a younger person. Go ahead.
All right, so let me know if that is showing or when it shows up.
It's loading now, and there you are.
Great. So for me, art has always been a vehicle that allows me to find ways to be involved in issues that I really care about. For instance, one of the nonprofits that I volunteer with is Awakenings, which is an arts organization in Chicago that gives survivors of sexual violence a platform to share their stories as a way to heal through art and to educate the public about the realities of sexual violence through art exhibitions, concerts, a literary magazine, and other performances. I don't have a background in working with survivors professionally, and I don't have the legal or counseling capabilities to pursue justice or provide support. But I do have the ability to write art grants. So I had known about Awakenings a little bit after I moved to Chicago. And I had in the back of my head for a long time that I wanted to work with them. Then following the resurgence of the Me Too movement, I was just so paralyzed with raw rage for such a long time. And as much as I wanted these attackers and rapists to be imprisoned, humiliated, stripped of everything, I had an even stronger need to directly help the survivors themselves. So in 2019, I wrote a grant to facilitate a workshop at Awakenings with Margaret Shepard, who's an artist and the founder of Underpaper, which is a paper-making project for survivors of sexual violence. Participants brought in personal items of clothing, often undergarments, cut them up, and then fed them into the paper beater, then pulled the individual sheets of paper from the pulp using a special screen called a molten decal. Then they brought their paper home and they manipulated it in different ways, including painting on it, drawing, writing, collage. Some even collaborated with one another. And then we organized an exhibition around the idea of reclaim, which was a response to the idea that when someone commits an act of sexual violence against you, that something has been taken away from you. And so with the exhibition, we were telling survivors that you can reclaim power, confidence, sexuality, and that your body is yours. I would say that this is my own work. So my own work is the combination of women's body politics that's rooted in this lifelong series of personal health complications, mixed in with historical and contemporary issues of women's health. It's aesthetically what I kind of jokingly refer to as an opulent rejection of chauvinistic minimalism, which is really just a fancy way of saying that I love tiny detail. But I think I wrote that in an exhibition statement when I was particularly angry at male artists. So on a more serious note, several years ago, I had a lumpectomy, And I was having concurrent complications with my whole reproductive system, and all within the span of a couple of years. So during this time, I was also reading a lot about the history of women's medicine, ranging from how surgeries for breast cancer were performed to antiquated medical abstracts, including theories that you could transfer breast cancer through breast milk to your nursing infant. So this series of drawings mixed poisonous plants with renderings of breasts and breast milk. Tangentially, women who are undergoing treatment or who have had mastectomies and can't breastfeed, or who haven't had cancer treatments but find breastfeeding to be painful, or can't for any number of reasons, or who choose not to, have been made to feel like you're less of a mother or less of a woman. As women, we're still in so many ways being tied back to our ability to conceive and feed another human being. So a lot of my art has to do with what that means when the ability for motherhood has been taken away from you. I did several series of drawings which were about the history of the mistreatment of women in the workforce. So these first few drawings are of gloves that represent 19th century dressmakers' hands. During this time, there was a bright green pigment that the Victorians were obsessed with, and it was everywhere, including wallpaper and in clothing. And it was made from copper arsenite, or arsenic. So when talking about the dangers of women's clothing, we often think about the women who are wearing the clothing, like corsets or these bright green dresses. But in reality, like in this case, the harmful effects were much more deadly to the working class women, such as seamstresses and dressmakers who were exposed to it for something like 20 hours a day, often in like poorly ventilated basements or like small dress shops. And it was so irritating to their systems that it caused ulcers in their eyes and lungs and open sores in their fingers and hands, which often led to the loss of use of their hands and wrists. These drawings were to memorialize the young women who worked in the radium factories in the United States during World War I. These factory workers were hired to paint glow-in-the-dark radium dials for soldiers overseas, and these women were instructed to lick the tips of the brushes that they had been dipping in radium to maintain their fine point. So the direct ingestion of radium caused the bones of these women to honeycomb. Some women lost entire limbs, jaws, and complete sets of teeth. So the name of the series was Safe in Small Doses. And that was the argument by the US Radium Corporation to dispute the carcinogenic effects of radium on their female workforce, despite extensive safety protocols that the male scientists and executives at US Radium used to protect themselves, including wearing full body protective suits when even entering the factory, not even having any sort of physical contact with the radium itself. So each apron is named after one of the women who worked in either the factory in Orange, New Jersey, or in Ottawa, Illinois. Which kind of brings me to my last point about these drawings, is that when we think about what an apron symbolizes, in many cases, it's this picture of domesticity and housework and women's work. And something that I think about a lot is the idea of women's work being just a derogatory term for women in detail-oriented labor industries like sewing, painting these watch dials, and letterpress, which for a long time was set by women because they had small hands. So in other words, women's work was just manufacturing in which women were more skilled at. This is an etching that I made to fundraise for the Chicago Printers Guild for the Southside Community Art Center fundraiser that we just launched this past weekend. I made this print to literally juxtapose the histories and stories that our bodies hold and that buildings hold. And there's some lovely copper in progress photos, because who doesn't love process shots? But what I really want to talk about in regards to this image is the fundraiser itself. So I first learned about the Southside Community Art Center from my coworker, Marcus Allen, who's also an artist, and he talked about exhibitions and talks that he had there. And so I kind of knew about this art center as just kind of like this great community center. And then after Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd, and all these protests erupted alongside all these organizations coming out with their statements about new directives and Black Lives Matter. And it was like everything that I ever signed up for to receive a newsletter from, and everything that I had ever bought anything from, was coming out with a statement. And the hope is always going to be that the intention to support Black people and Black communities is genuine and sustained. But we all know that the follow through is not always there. So after kind of getting past that initial like guttural reaction towards all of these murders, being on the board of the Chicago Printers Guild, we came up with this fundraiser as a way of putting money, community support, and raising awareness for an organization that's already doing the work of supporting Black artists, and which has been doing this work for 80 years. So it's their 80-year anniversary. And so many influential people have roots there, including Dr. Margaret S. Burroughs, Elizabeth Catlett, Charles White, Gwendolyn Brooks, Nat King Cole. And it just started as this place where Black artists could get together, exhibit, teach, share techniques, and just hang out. And that spirit truly continues to this day. And even walking into the gallery and walking into the building, it's still this place that shows extraordinary contemporary artists. They currently have a solo exhibition by Jesse Howard. Fahim Majid is shown there. And at the same time, when we visited in the executive director, Monique Brinkman-Hill's office, there's this big wall-sized blackboard that has drawings by Marcus's children. So it still has this feeling of being a true community center that shows all this great art, but at the same time, it's somewhere where you can just raise your children in. I guess I'll just say that being a working artist has truly empowered me and provided me an entryway to be able to support places that are doing amazing work, like Awakenings for Survivors, and then the Southside Community Art Center for Black artists.
Thank you, Raeleen. I know Kelly's going to ask a question. I just want to say to our listeners, just for a minute, that, I hope that as you're listening here, you feel, it's just, there's an intensity to what we're talking about here that's emotionally and politically so important. And I just want to thank Deb and Raeleen for their frank sharing. And Kelly, to you.
Yeah. So both of you, that was incredible. I love the work that you shared. And unlike Rebecca, I did not know your work previously. So this is a wonderful introduction to it. So for both of you, your work exists within a tradition of women artists who have for a long time made political work because they're devoted to certain causes. Can you talk a little bit about how this continues going forward? So Deb, I was struck as you were talking about, sort of the art that you did in reaction to things that were happening, the Trump election, and then immediately after, things like the Muslim ban and things like that. And of course, Raeleen, your work is also speaking to a particular moment in time. What sort of happens now? What happens going forward? We're moving into sort of a new political era, hopefully within the U.S. And what do you hope to be doing, sort of continuing and moving forward?
Well, like Raeleen, I also got all those statements from so many organizations saying, we believe in equality, and this sort of milquetoast type blanket, like, don't sue me, buy my stuff, come whatever, eat at my restaurant. And the other thing that was happening was all of the people in my neighborhood were boarding up windows. And I thought, what the hell is going on here? Like, nothing against my wonderful business owner neighbors, but I'm like, my windows are not getting shuttered. The idea is like, there's a reason that this is happening. And I guess in the sense of, you could put out a statement and not do anything. And I just didn't want to be that organization. And so we just like immediately said, yes, there's not enough access to Black printmakers at the Chicago Printmakers Collaborative. I know that already. And so let's change that. Let's just make it happen. And so we have all these programs in place. And I think it's just, that's how to move forward. That's my belief, is you got to do something and make it happen and put your money where your mouth is, and, and commit. And so that's what we're doing. We're trying to do, and we can always do it better. So it's been fun, like working with Kieran, and we're really looking forward to having this relationship with these or others or organizations that we've been funding through the sale of some of our protest collateral, like My Block, My City, and Embark, and Black Lives Matter Chicago, and some other places. So, Raeleen.
So I am really lucky to continue working with Awakenings. In addition to all the programming that they do year-round to support survivors, they're always partnering with different organizations throughout Chicago to approach issues across demographics. So last year, they did a partnership with Can Win, which focused on the comfort women issue and the issue of the Japanese army and their the issue of sexual slavery. So they partner with different organizations throughout Chicago, and I'm just really looking forward to continue to work with them. I sit on their visual arts committee, so that's something that I'm going to continue doing. So with the Chicago Printers Guild fundraiser for the South Section Community Arts Center, this fundraiser runs until summer, so we have lots of things planned in terms of artistic collaborations, print sales, and then beyond the fundraiser, because we wanted it to be about putting money into the building so that they're able to really showcase the amazing work that they have there in the best conditions possible. But beyond that, we really want this to be a continued partnership. So after it's safe to meet in person, this would mean in-person visits to exhibitions by the Guild or organized by the Guild, and then viewing their phenomenal archive by all the artists who have gone through there, and funding and facilitating printmaking workshops.
So, this has been true with each of the episodes we've done with these fabulous artists. We could talk for a whole lot longer. Unfortunately, we can't. We want to respect your time and the time of our audience. And I guess what I'd like to say in closing, in addition to thank you and encouraging those who are listening and those who will share this to look at the material on the website, is that I hope you're beginning to see why those of us who are political women run the gamut, right? We have so many different ways in which we can contribute, skills that we have, connections we can make, and images that the artists among us can mobilize with. So thank you, Deb, and thank you, Raeleen, for being with us this evening.
We likewise thank you, those of you who write well, and that would include both you and Kelly. So thank you back.
All right. Well, we'll talk again.